Good afternoon. We're going to get started here. We are still waiting on a couple of council members that have promised that they would be here and will be filing in shortly. With me today, welcome to the Budget Committee meeting for today, June 6th, here at City Hall. With me today are council members Jeremy Schrader and Councilmember Kevin Reich. My name is Lene Palmasano. I'm the chair of our budget committee, and we have today some overflow time where we needed to accommodate. We've had such great, robust discussions in our regular results meetings that we needed to push a couple of these presentations off because essentially others just had taken so much time. That and the nature of the really important work done by one of our departments here today, intergovernmental relations, was really using all of their capacity at the Capitol during the time that they were originally scheduled. So I think we will start with the assessor's office, if that's all right with you. And we have with us Director Patrick Todd. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Patrick Todd, Minneapolis City Assessor. I'm glad to be here and presenting my department's 2019 Results Minneapolis report. But before I get started on that, I just want to do a little bit of an introduction. I do have the Deputy City Assessor, Rebecca Malmquist, here joining us. We do also have two urban scholars. Yes, the urban scholars. So we have Nestejo and we have Courtney. And I also have along with me Natalie Jones, who's our business application manager in the department as well, and has helped us compile a lot of the information in our report. So thank you very much.
Thank you. You know, given that your office is not immediately here in City Hall, it's nice to see the faces of the people that we're reaching out to regularly. So thank you for joining us. Thank you.
So we will go through the performance summary really quickly, which would be the slide number 1. So in the department's assessors results Minneapolis, we really have it broken down into 3 key areas. The first area would be in the valuation and classification of real estate. That is the quantity, the quality, and the accuracy of the actual assessment itself. So we feel that that's really important to measure. It's also a measurement that the Department of Revenue holds us accountable to. The second area is in what we would call the preserving the equity and fairness of the distribution of the property tax burden. That is oftentimes referred to more, at least in our office, as the litigation. It's tax court cases and appeals. And the reason why we say that's really in the preserving the equity and distribution of the tax burden is because whenever we change one value, either through tax court appeals or the local boards, when we change one value, that impacts everybody else because that tax burden gets shifted to everybody else. And so the more aggressive, the more professional, the more accurate we can be on tax court litigation and boards of appeal, the more accurate and the more fair our assessment is citywide. And then the third area that we focus on for Results Minneapolis is what's called assessment, administration and business systems. And that is really I would say the soft skills, that's the engagement with the city or the engagement with the taxpayers. It's also with staff as well. We feel that those are 2 really important areas that we need to continuously focus on year after year if we're going to be successful, not only serving the taxpayers of City of Minneapolis and serving the elected officials, but also retaining high quality staff, because in my report later on, we'll talk about staff turnover and what is coming down the pike. So the city does have enterprise priorities that we do have to, that we do work to try to strive and meet the city's goals. We do have, the city has the goal of 41% people of color within the department, as well as 45% for women. I would say that we're really, really close on women within our department as far as the women in workforce. We are 39%, and in a small department like my own with only 38 staff, that really could swing with one person. We do have 3 vacancies within the department. I would expect that before the end of the year, when we have those vacancies, we will actually be meeting the city's aspirational goals of 45% women within the department. I do want to point out that in my leadership team, we are 57%. 57% of my staff are women at this point in time, and very proud of that. And I have just some of the smartest, most talented staff in the state. I couldn't be more pleased. When we're looking at trying to increase the diversity for people of color, it's a significant challenge for us. There just isn't significant diversity within our profession. There just isn't. When we have applicants, we always look for more of a diversity. The diversity candidates, we try to send out information and flyers and notifications to where we think we'll pick up, inform people so that they can apply. We need to be more proactive. What we're currently doing at this point in time is we're doing more with community engagement activities with my staff. We're also doing career fairs. So we're doing college, and not only in college, but we're also doing high school career fairs as well. We're finding that once people get into college, it's almost too late to really introduce assessors as a profession. We're also doing neighborhood meetings, and we're also doing what's called a Project for Pride in Living Pathways program. That's a project that we spent about a year on. Last year, that's where Project from Pride in Living was focusing on trying to get people of color to be interested in the profession of assessing. And they had a cohort of 6 people last year. They did participate, I think Hennepin County, Dakota County, Hennepin County, all participated. We were not able to participate in that at the very end because we just didn't have the funding within our budget to be able to pay for that. But going forward, we think we've got a good strategy. We think oftentimes by just having some exposure to meeting people and talking about what we do, it does become a career that people are willing to consider. So the other city priority or enterprise priority is spending within diverse suppliers. We are a very small department. We really don't spend a heck of a lot, to be honest with you. This last year for 2018, we only spent $22,000 on professional services. About $19,000 of that was just really to keep our CAMA system fine-tuned so that it does the best analysis it can, so we have the best assessment year over year. So after that, we only had about $3,000 worth of professional services that we had the opportunity to use for minority or women-owned businesses, and we were able to capitalize that as well. So knowing that this is a priority and knowing that we're probably going to be, not probably, we are going to a new CAMA system, we would expect that really most of our discretionary dollars will be able to focus on the city's priorities, which is minority and women-owned businesses as well. Any questions? Not yet? Okay. For department priorities, we have 2 department priorities that I'd like to talk about. The first one would be employee engagement, education, and professional development. The second one is the new CAMA assisted mass appraisal software. And I'll start with the second because that one was, to our good fortune, the city council approved funding so that we were able to move forward. And within the last 2 weeks, we really nailed down the last of the details. So I would expect that the city council will have before the city council the contract to approve our contract, and that we will start in Q4 on the transition plan to transition to a new CAMA system that we hope to have up and running shortly thereafter. So, but with that new CAMA system, what that allows us to do is be really more precision, have greater precision, I should say, with the valuation of property within the city of Minneapolis, which is also going to be more transparent, which is one of the biggest challenges that we have currently today. Our current system is not transparent at all, but the next system will. So we think that that will ease some of the tensions within the taxpayers, and I think when we can be transparent, people will feel that they are being more properly served, and it's they don't like to not have a good understanding of how values are actually calculated. It'll also provide us with a lot more reports. It'll also provide us with a lot more maps, which will, again, I think from the elected officials, the more information we can provide you, the more you can also pass that information on to your constituents as well. The second priority, which I want to talk about, would be employee engagement, education, and professional development. And this is a priority for my department because based on the demographics, 48% of the assessment or of the assessors in my field within the next 10 years will retire. And then if you take a look at within the next 5 years, we have 23% of the assessors within my profession that will be retiring. So we're going to be seeing some significant turnover, and you can only recruit so many people. And when you have that much turnover, you're losing quite a bit of institutional knowledge, in addition to just not having the number of staff. You'll be bidding for people at some point in time. So when we're looking at this, as my leadership team and I are discussing what does the future hold when we have some significant turnover as far as retirement, it's not that we might lose, in fact we will lose some institutional knowledge within my department, but what scares me more than anything else, and I think should be a concern for the city council and the mayor, is that because this is a statewide problem as far as retirements go, just employee retention will be important. So we're not going to lose when I walk out the door within 5 years, we're going to lose that institutional knowledge. But when Hennepin County, Ramsey County, Dakota County are also losing leadership positions, my concern is we're going to be losing staff to those other cities that have promotional opportunities and leadership opportunities available. So our strategy going forward is we need to get our staff very much engaged. We need to make sure that our staff are very feel valued as far as an employee. We need to make sure that we're providing educational opportunities and training tools so that they feel like as we invest in them, that they will stay here and continue to invest in the city of Minneapolis. Our goal, and HR has said it before, we want Minneapolis to be the employer of choice. And that's really been our goal at this point in time going forward, knowing that within the next 5 years, we could lose 23% of our staff as far as that goes. So how do we plan on doing that? We're doing it because, or we plan to do, what we're planning to do is through education and training, through licensing right now. We do pay for staff's licensing, we pay for their continuing education, and that is not something that any other jurisdiction doesn't already do. So we need to do something more than just paying for education for their license and their continuing education. So what we're trying to do is create a culture within the assessor's office that really changes their perception that it's not a job, it's a career. We're trying to create an environment where the job is bigger than just the city of Minneapolis. So we're providing opportunities that allow staff to see themselves either working locally or being exposed to opportunities locally in their career, personal and professional career development, either on the local level, on the state level, on the national level, or even on the international level. And when we can do that, it really becomes, we're hoping that we have staff that feel, again, valued, appreciated, and that by staying in our office, that they have doors that are open to them that they wouldn't have any other jurisdiction. And just to identify some of the things that we've had that are successes, we do have 4 staff in the office that have gone through the educational programming to become, or 3 of them have become MAIs, which are, it's a designation that people would say is probably equivalent to a master's degree in real estate as far as the level of complexity and degree of difficulty. So we have 3 staff. One is currently just down the hall, actually testifying in tax court. I'm very proud of that. We brought in the International Association of Assessing Officers conference last year. That was 1,400 assessors, property tax experts, and vendors in the convention center. Really great education. We had 20 people that participated in that. Again, trying to expose our staff to an aspect of their job that is just greater than Minnesota. We have staff that are currently working with the state on developing educational opportunities for the state, and we also have people that are staff that are currently educators, teaching summer seminars, fall seminars, and things like that, or courses like that. And then last but not least, we do have Rebecca Malmquist, who is on the International Association of Assessing Officers Board of Directors. Again, we try to lead by example. We're trying to provide as many doors that we can open for people so that they feel like working for the city of Minneapolis is a great place to work, because we really value their time, their effort, and we want to see them grow both personally and professionally. So, any questions on that? Okay. As we get into some of the metrics, this is probably, these are similar to the performance summaries as I had first started with. This is the appraisal and assessment administration, the value and classification of real estate. This is, again, the accuracy, the quality, accuracy, and uniformity of the assessment. We have 4 metrics that we're being measured by the Department of Revenue, and 4 metrics that we actually hold ourselves accountable to. We have the sales ratio by classification. We have what's called the coefficient of dispersion. We have the price-related differential, and we also have the sales ratio. The first one with the sales ratio by classification, that indicates our level of assessment. How accurate are we? The state would say, or the department, or the statute would say that we need to be between 90 and 105% as a median for every property type. If you take a look at the chart, you'll find that we're really close. In fact, year after year, since 2007, we've gotten better and better as far as our overall assessment. As we do these charts and analysis, you'll see the yellow line up on the chart. It's an industrial property type. You see it trailing off rising up to about 103. That became a red flag for us. So my industrial staff spent time this last year looking into the sales, talking with professional experts in the field, and trying to understand why our assessments were not mirroring the industrial properties. And I can say confidently, since 2018 into the 2019 assessment, that we brought that overall ratio back down into the 90s. So in the next report for results Minneapolis next year, you'll see that we'll have improved on that overall ratio. On the coefficient of dispersion, which is really a measurement of the uniformity of our assessment, how accurate are we year over year with all property types, the standard would say that we have to be below 15 on a metric if you're residential, and below 20. And if you take a look at the chart for coefficient of dispersion, it's the right-hand chart. We are at around 10, 10, and 12 between the residential, the apartment, and the commercial. So we feel very, very good that year over year, especially in the residential and the apartments, we're fairly consistent. It's a little bit more difficult on commercial. It's a more complex property type, and we also have the fewest number of sales in that. So the more sales you have, the more predictability there is in valuation of property. So the fewer the sales, the more difficult it is. And you'll notice in that one, it says industrial is not being reported. The Department of Revenue, if you have less than 6 sales, they don't report that because it's statistically not a good indicator of value or a good indicator of a metric. So for that very reason, you won't see the industrial report on that one, or even on the price-related differential. And this statistic is, the price-related differential is a great statistic because it measures the uniformity that we have from the least expensive real estate into the most expensive real estate. So if we're valuing properties at 95%, at let's say the 100,000 mark, 100,000 of market value, if you go up to the 500 or the million or the 5 million, are we uniformly measuring those properties at 95, or are we at 105, or are we something considerably less? As you can tell in this metric on residential, we're really consistent. Again, that's oftentimes driven because we have a lot of data in residential. We're really very good in the apartment as well. And again, we do have some challenges with the commercial, but more recently we're tracking much better with the market. And again, with very few sales, it doesn't take too many sales to make to skew a statistical number like that. But all in all, if you take a look at where we've been from 2014 or where we are today, we absolutely are producing a much higher quality assessment year over year. Last but not least would be our quintile statistics. By statute, we have to see 20% of the city every year. That's called the quintile. We are out of compliance at this point in time. We try to hit 20%. That's about 22 to 23,000 properties that we door knock every year. When workloads change, things seem to have to get shifted around. So when last year we had 1,400 appeals, we found that we were starting our equalization, our door knocking, almost a month later. And because you lost a month of door knocking, you're not going to have the same number of, you're not going to reach your goal of 22 to 23,000. We're fortunate this is a quintile, this is a 5-year cycle, so we're optimistic that we can make up some of those differences. This year, because we had even more appeals than last year, we, again, based on our presentation yesterday to the City of the Whole, we are about a month behind again. So the likelihood of us making that up this year, we don't know how we're going to do it yet, but we will sit down with the leadership team and put a plan together to see how we can either make up what we didn't make up last year, or at least for sure not fall any further behind. One of the reasons we also might have a little bit of a challenge is we do have 3 vacant positions at this point in time that we are hiring for. We have closed on the applications, that we're going through the hiring process, the interview process at this point in time, and we do have to, we hope to have those people on staff by August, hopefully. At this point, but that by that point in time, you're not going to get them out there door knocking and picking up a lot of the numbers. So this year will be a little bit of a struggle for us to meet that requirement. Nope, sorry. The second metric that we talked about as far as tax court and appeals, we're seeing a significant increase as values have continued to climb, as the market has continued to go up. we're finding that not only has the local board appeals gone up, they were up from 1,400, which was the peak for a number of years, up to 1,766. In tax court, we last year we went from 326 in 17 to 360 tax court appeals in 18. We're up to 483 in 19, which is a 48% increase. And from 2015 to just 2019, I think it's a little over 90% increase in tax court appeals. We really have to be aggressive on this. We really have to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollar. But at this point in time, it'll be a challenge to have 483 tax court petitions. That's more than settle. I'd be trying to settle more than one a day, and in tax court, that's just not likely. So some of these we don't have a plan at this point in time. We will sit down and we're continuing to have discussions of what is the most appropriate way to address this tax court litigation. So we do have some options, but at this point in time, we don't have anything concrete. We do measure the output, or we measure our success through tax court. What are our average stipulations? What percentage are we getting dismissals? How much levy do we lose? How much value are we retaining? And I'm very proud to say that historically, up through 2017, we do a fantastic job. My staff does a fantastic job getting stipulations and dismissals on properties that where the value is fine. Right now, I think to appeal your value, it's $350 if you're a commercial property owner, which is not a lot of money. Many applications oftentimes will file just to preserve their appeal right. And so just because someone appeals doesn't mean that we're going to change their value. It's going to be based on market data and an analysis that really supports, I should say, it's just based on appraisal analysis, I should say. So, but again, in that measure, we do measure my staff, and we are very proud of the outputs that we have in work, or the EMV retention.
Mr. Todd, you mentioned how inexpensive it is to appeal a property, in this case a commercial property. I would imagine that your staff going through the work of an appeal is certainly quite a bit more expensive than doing that $350, if only to appeal, if only to preserve your ability to appeal later. Does the city have any direct authority as to what that cost of appeal is? Because you're certainly crunched for your workload. Or what would be fair?
Madam Chair, so are you saying what is our cost to work these, or do we have an input into the cost of the actual the cost of the appeal process of the $350?
Both, but I guess
Okay.
my original question was, do we have the ability to influence how much it costs to appeal?
No.
We don't.
No, Madam
And
Chair,
then-
no. The tax court and the state do set that, and through discussions, they've made it very, very clear that the cost to appeal should never be a determinant or a detriment to somebody appealing their value. So they keep it at a very affordable price point. So that's because someone's rights to appeal shouldn't be based on ability to pay.
Certainly, but then, given the extra work incurred by doing that, just kind of on a routine basis, how does that impact? What would you imagine would be the resource cost from the city on going through that process of an appeal? Because you are then you are allocating staff resources to every appeal, correct?
Yes, Madam Chair, absolutely. We would have to probably start calculating number of hours, and I know we are calculating number of hours that staff put into tax court cases. One of the avenues that Hennepin County has taken is they've hired people that do nothing but tax court litigation. They have appraisers on staff. That's their only job, is tax court litigation. We're currently within my office, they do not only the tax court litigation, they're also doing their 20% quintiles, they're also doing the new improvements. And if we were to put these appeals on a heat map, you'd find that they're very centrally located now in the CBD district. And so while we are our largest priority, because it has a significant impact on the city's levy, as well as the tax burden with the property tax owners and payers, we really try we put a lot of effort and emphasis in the tax court, but at some point you still have to get all the other work done with the permits. And we've seen billions, year over year, billions of new construction going on, and my staff are still out there collecting that data, valuing those properties, in addition to their, I wouldn't say door knocking downtown, but they literally have to visit every property, 20% of every property downtown. So if you're looking for a number, we could probably start pulling some data together to let you know what it would probably run us on a per case basis. But one avenue that, again, Hennepin County has gone to is we just are going to have dedicated appraisers that do nothing but, they don't answer the phones for taxpayers. They are dedicated to tax score. And that is a different model to approach.
And just to be clear, that $350 goes to Hennepin County?
I think that is, I think, yeah, I was going to say, that goes to the state. I would say
The
that.
state.
Yeah, I would think that goes to the, actually, tax court, I think is what probably gets.
I get that from the purview of the city, we always, that appeal, the ability to appeal the value of one's home is free, should be the ability to have a conversation. I'm just concerned that the ability to then, after that date, continue to preserve their right to appeal incurs a lot of resources from your city staff. We have to figure out a way to manage that, was my only point. I also want to note, as you continue, that we've been joined by council members Ellison and Jenkins. So thanks for joining us.
All right, the next slide, similar to tax court, we do have local boards of appeal. In a similar fashion, we have seen that increase. I do want to correct a typo. Back when we had first created this PowerPoint presentation, we read around 1,750. Since the close of the local board, we actually concluded at 1,766, so we're about 16 shy. I just wanted to correct that because yesterday we quoted a different number, and I didn't want to. I want to make sure that we're correct. So again, to the local boards, I think that there's a number of reasons why property taxes, and this is primarily residential. I think there's a number of reasons why people are appealing their value. Again, it's because we've seen some significant increases in market value increases year over year over year. We're finding that the property tax relief programs, in my opinion, are not keeping up with the rate of market value increases. So when the homestead credit was providing property tax relief back in the early 2000s, and it was $307, and what was the median value, what was the median tax bill, till today that median value is almost, could be double. Taxes are similar, but that homestead market value exclusion is about the same. So the net to a property owner is hitting them in the pocketbook, and so this is one avenue that they can use to see if their value is correct and try to impact the bottom line. The other thing I would like to at least mention is that my staff has done a fantastic job of community engagement, and it's really at the direction of the city council and the mayor that we need to make sure that we're breaking down any barriers that would keep people from calling and appealing their values. And so through neighborhood meetings, through PSAs, through KMOJ radio, through running our applications through the plain language software, making sure that the information we're providing is easily understandable. We have an online application that's available 24/7. I think we've always encouraged people that part of the way the assessment works, that if it's best if you can call us if the value is wrong. People oftentimes don't feel like they could call us. You can't fight City Hall. And we've been trying to break down that barrier that, no, if your value is wrong, we really want to hear from you. So I would also be cautious that if people are looking at this number of 1,766 as being the assessment maybe is not as good as it should be, I would argue that, in fact, I think some of those increases are because we're reaching out to people that probably could have reached out last year or the years before, didn't feel they could, but absolutely we're breaking down those barriers, and people are calling today, and we're able to help them. So I think that's a positive, even though that's actually creating more work for my staff. So.
Thank you. We have a question or comment from Councilmember Schrader.
Yeah, on that note, I just want to thank you for that. I think it is better government. It's better, more transparent. It's more accessible. That said, it is a lot of work, and it's a lot to take on. So I just want to thank you and your office for all you've done on that.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I'm curious, Mr. Todd, what have you found from a proactive communication basis is most effective? Is it different in different parts of the city?
That is a good question. We haven't collected that level of data. No.
But any impressions on what's working well or what isn't?
No, I really haven't. I haven't looked at the numbers. I'm sorry. I wish I could answer that question for you, but no, I'd have to just be guessing if I did.
Sure.
But we will circle back with communications because a number of our efforts have been worked with communications as far as number of hits on the website, and again the PSAs that we had participated on with the KMOJ. We also did something on La Raza Radio. We really tried to get out there in front of this and do what is the right and most transparent way to really do our work. So last but not least, and this really kind of rolls into what Councilmember Schrader was complimenting my staff for. You know, when we talk about property tax engagement or property tax owner engagement, we go so far above what the industry standard would be. In fact, I would say that 90% of what we do, there's not another city or county assessor that has done what we've done in our office. And it's actually makes it the fun part of our job, to be truthful. You know, let me just run through. So for 2018, you know, we did 7 neighborhood presentations. We participated in the city academy. We've done 3 career fairs. For my staff training, we were able to bring in, we worked with NCR. We brought in guest speakers from the Southeast Asian community, as well as the Latino community and the American Indian community, to talk about really how can we best understand and serve the customers when there's a cultural difference. And it was really enlightening. It was they appreciated having the opportunity to speak to my staff. My staff really appreciated having the opportunity to listen to what they brought in. You know, we participated in the Community Connections Conference, the PPL Pathways, La Raza Radio, MPR Radio, engagement. So when we have all those touch points, that makes it fun because it's just not going out door knocking, dealing with appeals. This is really getting to that personal level of we're really out there serving the taxpayers and really making those connections. And I think that really changes. For my staff and for myself, that makes this not a job, but this is really a career, serving the taxpayers, serving the city council. Last but not least is the AMA accreditation. This is a statutory requirement that there has to be a minimum of an AMA certification for a percentage of my staff. When you are a new hire, you are given a window of opportunity. I think it's 5 years to become AMA. But when the law went into effect, they had a start date that says by 2022, July 2022, you have to have the staff that were on, the appraisers that were on staff fully certified. And back when that happened, the city council was generous to provide us with additional educational dollars to get staff through this training because it is an additional cost. Right now, we're ahead of schedule. We're at 46%. And we feel that by the end of the July of 2022, we'll have 100% of our staff meeting minimum statutes on that. So with that was the end of my presentation. I think there's just 3 things that I would like to maybe summarize. Those are the 3 challenges as we talk about the purpose of results, and that is for me to be able to communicate what's working well and what's not working well. The 3 big red flags for us in our office that we're going to be struggling with is a tax court litigation. It'll be, again, the appeals process through the local boards and county boards, and then the third is just staff retention, making sure that we're doing a great job, making sure that staff are engaged, educated, and feeling valued. And those are probably the things that will be the number 1 priorities going forward for my department. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, and thank you for this presentation. I know that some of it we saw yesterday in the presentation before, but this gives us a more uniform look at how to rate the management performance of departments over time. I would welcome questions or thoughts from my colleagues. I don't see any right now. You've answered a lot of my questions, and one was about how much the appeal count has jumped. In just 2 years, you've over doubled the amount of appeals. How you managed to respond to this increased workload, given stable resources and now 3 vacancies in your department, is admirable, but it is something that we're concerned about. I'm curious. You mentioned yesterday and again today that you're about 1 month behind in your next assessment cycle, the quintile reevaluation. How do you make up that time at the end, or do you?
Madam Chair, we will do the best we can. how we've managed the appeals, because we had more appeals than we were really preparing for. We've had people working longer hours. We have people working flex hours. We have people working on Saturdays. I would imagine that we will be offering something similar. You can only see so many properties at one time. So if you see 60 properties in a day, and if you had to go to 80, sometimes between 60 to 80, they all become a blur. You get to a point of fatigue, and that's not a good thing. So what maybe we have to do is start being more flexible on hours, and even looking at weekends and things like that. And we're over 30,000 in overtime so far for the local boards. And I know that we cut that off when we did the presentation yesterday. And I know that I won't say significantly higher, but it's more than that by the time we're done with the local boards of appeal. We might have to do something similar to that for the equalization as well. But there isn't anything out there that another jurisdiction is doing that we could adopt at this point in time, that there's an easier way, or because you physically have to look at them. I mean, the statute says you physically have to view every property, 20% of the city every year. So you could do scooters, maybe we can get the nice rides, maybe, but we'll see. No, we're working on that right now. We're focused right now on the appeals process, but we'll have some time as a leadership team to focus on how we're going to catch up on our quintile at this point.
Thank you. Is there any particular time of day that you find more effective in reaching people in person than other times of day? And I might add that everybody up here on this dais is quite familiar with door knocking, so we feel your pain.
Madam Chair, I would imagine that if we offered later hours, that there would be a percentage of my staff that would say they wouldn't mind working through the dinner hour. I think that it's been my experience that people do not like to be disturbed during their evening hours, during dinners or when they're relaxing. To have the assessor come by and say, "Hi, can I come through your house?" Would not necessarily be well received. But I could see weekends would be, people are more oftentimes outside doing chores and things like that. But I do have staff that probably would take advantage of the evening.
Thank you. I'm curious, how much is the department's workload impacted by general economic conditions or general market conditions from your perspective?
I think that is the core, the fundamental reason why we're struggling at this point in time. The market is, again, since we saw the rapid increase right up to about 2007, and then we saw the crash, and because of the crash, we saw a lot of appeals. We were out there doing a significant amount of work when the market was going down, and then it turned on a dime, and since 2010, we've seen rapid increase in values for the last 9 consecutive years. And so with those increases, we're seeing more appeals and more tax court litigation. So it's really very much tied to what the market's going on. And just because the market pulls back doesn't mean that our appeals are going to go down. In fact, oftentimes they go up. So we hope that we can find some efficiencies with our new camera system. It'll be mobile, so there's going to be less need for my staff to go out there with paper, handwriting information out, come back and keep punching it. It'll be instantaneous. When they make changes, the changes will be updated at that point in time. So we'll find some efficiencies, but it's not going to make or break whether we can see 20,000 versus 22,000 or 25,000 properties a year. So.
Thank you. Any other questions or thoughts from my colleagues? I might speculate that we talk about, and we want to talk about across the enterprise, how we effectively communicate with residents. And you said you weren't sure, it's kind of too early to tell. And I can see that because in this year's appeals and geographically where they are coming from, it appears that there might still be some residual activity from years prior. For example, in my own ward that I represent in the city, there were over double-digit increases the previous year and very low increases this year. But I do think it's possible that people feel that in their pocketbook, and then the next year choose to appeal, or it gets difficult to measure. This year, on the other hand, we've seen double-digit increases on the north side, and it is probably too early to tell if in the next couple of years we will see a number of those properties appealing as well. So I want to thank your department, and if you have anything else you want
Well, and it's not based on any statistical analysis, but the question was raised yesterday by, I think, Councilmember Jenkins about why properties in maybe North Minneapolis or wards 4 and 5 would not. And one thing I would love to have done some research on would be the ratio between homestead and non-homestead. If I was an investor and my property value went up 15%, if I'm renting my property, I'm passing that oftentimes on to the tenant. So would I call and appeal the value? Maybe not. But it definitely having an impact with the tenant. And the tenant can't appeal. So I would say that if someone wanted to do some analysis on that, that would be interesting to see if there's a correlation between rental, neighborhoods that have a high concentration of rental versus owner occupants. Because who's bearing the brunt. And so
That's okay, that's just fine.
so that would be a kind of from Councilmember Jenkins when you would ask that question. That was a thought that went through my head, but it was just based on observation more than anything else. So
Yeah, that's a really interesting thought and an idea, I think, for further study, for someone to study, and perhaps beyond Minneapolis, of course, given that we're in an affordable housing crisis in our country. Council Vice President Jenkins.
Yeah, I would think, I know there has been studies done about who is accessing property tax relief, and a lot of times people aren't necessarily filing their property tax, even renters tax too, so that could be a educational opportunity to really talk to people about these programs that help to reduce that burden, which gets shifted down to the renter. So that's an interesting I guess analysis or viewpoint perspective, and we need to look into that. Thank you.
This is exactly the kind of ideas that we like in the results conversation. So without any additional questions or thoughts from my colleagues, thank you to the Assessor's Department. Thanks for all of your work. We'll transition now to intergovernmental relations.
Madam Chair and members, my name is Gene Ranieri, and we're setting up to answer a question just a few seconds ago about educational opportunities for homestead and renters relief. Your predecessors about 8 or 10 years ago on this committee, IGR committee and the City Council, were concerned about that issue because we were discovering that about 52% of people who were eligible for either renter or homeowner relief actually applied. So the council in those days passed a resolution and a policy statement that we should work with the Department of Revenue, and I think we even had the commissioner come and testify that we need to bring that number up. And today, when talking to the commissioner a couple months ago, it's now closer to 66, 67%, but we still have a ways to go. Some of the things we were able to get done is the department was to do some outreach. They actually had a contract for some nonprofits to let people know that this relief was here. We have briefed council members on the relief and how it works. So I think it's an open question that something we can work on. But I do want to know that the city council, the city, about 8 to 10 years ago, was concerned about it and took some action.
That's really informative. Thank you.
Okay. And working very closely with Patrick and the assessor, it's been educational for us too.
Mm-hmm. So welcome, Mr. Ranieri and the Intergovernmental Relations Department. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you very much. As you're aware, we are looking at 2018 and 2019. When we talk about state government relations, if you wish, we can distribute a document dealing with 2019 legislation because we finished the summer yesterday. In terms of the 4 performance areas we work in: grant management, state government relations, federal government relations, and regional relations and partnerships. We look at over the trend in grant management. It's about an increase of more than 5%, and Mr. Bauer can go into detail about that. We're seeing this year an increase in federal CDBG. In the area of state government relations, it's really hard, I think, in the areas of state government relations, federal government relations, and regional relationships to come up with analytics. Because when I look at this number, 5%, I'm not exactly sure what's being measured here. We can tell you that we think the workload and the issues in state government relations is probably no trend in 2018 versus 2017, but in 2018 to 2019, it definitely went up. And it basically went up because of the change in leadership, particularly in one house of the legislature. In terms of federal government relationships, you look at it we can do some analytics there because of some of the dollars, but one of the things we have to remember is prior to about 2011, we had earmarks, and we were very successful in getting federal earmarks from the federal government, and also the Recovery Act in 2009 generated additional revenue across the country for cities and counties. In regional relationships, same question we had with state government. If anything, there's probably been an increase in activity with the Met Council, an increase in a trend because of the changes, again, in leadership, not only at the legislature, but also at the Met Council. So we like to work with the folks from the city coordinator's office and trying to figure out what are best ways to measure what we do. As you are aware, we annually come to the city council with a legislative agenda and policies. We are planning to come back this year with a federal agenda. We try to do that every 2 years. And with regional relationships, we have adopted policies, and we probably will bring those back in again this year. So that's an area we have some concern about, is how do we measure what we do? And how well do we do it? In terms of our workforce diversity, again, 75% of our workforce are women. I have to admit now today it has dropped. We're down to about 2/3. We are in the market now to recruit some people to come to work for the IGR. We're looking for a position as a senior government relations person, and we're also possibly looking for a person to assist in our grants. We are hopefully looking for a diverse pool. However, in the area, particularly of government relations, the market itself is not very diverse, and it's something we're working on. Matter of fact, this year when we had to go out and recruit some assistants during the session, we were able to find a small firm that help us on a contract. That firm happened to be woman-owned, and that person happened to be Native American. So it would help our numbers next year, but we'd like to find a permanent replacement, some diversity. In terms of the $295,000 spending with diverse suppliers, we don't do a lot of spending, but most of it's in lobbyists, and many of those firms, again, there's not a lot of diversity there. In terms of, but this year we have been able to find some, and that person also is in our target market program now, so she is registered there. In terms of grant management, I will turn it over to Matt Bauer to talk a little bit more in detail and discuss some of the trends that are happening with the federal government. There are some reports that mention that federal grants or federal aid to states are up, and are up significantly, and that is correct when you add in and include Medicaid and Medicare. And most of the increase in spending across the country from the federal government is in Medicare and Medicaid, and in fact spending for transportation, CDBG, housing is actually down when you figure in inflation over the last 10 years. Matt?
I'm Matt Bauer with the department. Yeah, I mean, the broad trend from the federal level is variety of reasons. The discretionary dollars that Congress has available or makes available to local communities has decreased, especially in real terms, and that's reflective in any numbers you might see that we're receiving here locally. Also, it's maybe also instances of changing priorities. So changing federal priorities in terms of what they do want to fund may not necessarily match with what we're doing here locally. And so that's a consideration as well in those numbers. When I'd say the spigot was opened and made available to communities, but most recently with just the Recovery Act of now going on about 8-9 years ago, we did well with that. And so we're positioned, we have every confidence in our departments and the work that they do, that if there's appropriate opportunities available for them, they will pursue them, and they will be successful at getting their share of dollars out of that.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, the next slide talks about state government relations, and these are the accomplishments and things we advanced and pushed in 2018. It was a good year for bonding. We got some money for the Upper Harbor Terminal, and also some funding for the family partnership. And then also we introduced some bills, and we're able to keep local government aid, lodging tax, things of that nature. Many of these things in the 2019 session were also advanced. If you want me to go into more detail on the 2018 list, I can.
I think we're okay. We keep hearing every few days about one more thing you got in 2019. So I think we're comfortable by now, though, with the 2018.
Okay, thank you. One thing before we go any further, I'd like to introduce my staff, because a lot of these folks work behind the scenes, and they really stepped up when we lost 2 people during the session. Matt Bauer, stand up, please. We also have an intern, and our intern every year has been really phenomenal. My biggest disappointment is that we've never been able to retain an intern as an employee of the city. And this is Parker Bennett. He's from Iowa, and he was phenomenal. He pitched in and did a lot of work for us. Allison Nessie is started as a, stand up. Allison was one of our management analysts, program analysts. She came in when Sasha Bergman left. She filled in, and she stayed and did a very good job. Sonia Lewis also works on grants. Sonia has been very active in looking at federal grants and working on some programs. And then Lauren Olson is our person at the Met Council, and she has a workload that varies. Right now, after the 2040 plan has been submitted, there's also lots of new activities with the Met Council, particularly in the whole area of transit and transportation.
Not to mention everything she knows about airports.
Oh, God, yes. Yes, also the Metropolitan Airports Commission, and she probably could fly a plane, yes.
Council Vice President Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Murray, you introduced your staff, and they have been doing a remarkable job. I've actually had an opportunity to work with many of them over this past year, and really appreciate their efforts. I was wondering if Ms. Olson could talk a little bit about the Met Council policy, policy appointments or boards or some committees that are currently recruiting, so that my colleagues can have an idea.
Sure, yes.
Welcome, Ms. Olson.
Thank you. Madam Chair, council members, Lauren Olson, Government Relations. So thank you for asking about that. So the Metro Cities organization, as you guys know, is made up of cities that are in the 7-county metropolitan area. And so they represent our collective interests, both at the Met Council and the legislature and the executive branch. Over the summer, there is a policy development process that occurs with Metro Cities. There are 4 different policy-focused committees that meet. There's one on transportation, one on housing and economic development, there's one on the taxes and the economy. And forgive me, because there's a whole nother set of committees that do LMC work, and sometimes I get the titles confused. And then there's the agencies committee, which would include things like SAC and administrative issues. So there's 4 different committees. I sent you guys an email about that. They each meet about 3 times over the summer, and then in the fall they've concluded their business and make recommendations about potential policies that should be advanced at the Met Council and legislature, and then those are considered by the board and potentially adopted. Those policy committees are open to city staff and to city council members, and IGR, of course, will be on each of those committees. And we work closely with departments. We're starting that process now to make sure that we're prepared for those committees to be as effective as possible, to take our experience at the legislature this year and other activities in Met Council and try to shape as effectively as possible the policy outcomes. And we start working internally with other departments, and we work with other stakeholders and friends, organizations, and electeds throughout the metro to make sure we can effectively advance some important work, on behalf of all of us in the region. So take a look at that and check out the dates that those are scheduled for, see if you're able and interested in participating. And then be aware that there will also be a similar process occurring over this time frame for the League of Minnesota Cities, which represents a broader swath of cities throughout the state. And so some of those interests are a little bit different from the metropolitan area, and they also have 4 committees that will have a similar type of process. Again, we'll be fully engaged on that, and I'm sure communicating with you guys about issues important to you throughout. Do you have any questions about that?
Nope.
All right,
That
thank
was
you.
really informative. Thank you. Oh, you, okay.
Madam Chair, in the area of federal government relations, the chart shows the federal pass-through value. As you can see, it has gone down, and direct value or direct dollars, a lot of that is CDBG. And CDBG not only includes Community Development Fund from the federal government, and that includes CDBG, I think a shelter program, HOPWA, and I'm missing one. Oh, home program. So all 4 of those there's been an increase for this coming budget year. And one of the things we're thinking about for next year is we have federal contracts for lobbyists, and we have reduced their contract amounts over the last 2 years, and are thinking about we may not need all that capacity because not much is going on in Washington. So that'll be something we will talk about during the budget. And we have reduced it in the last 2 years.
That's interesting. So just in summary, to compare this to an earlier slide, I think that it looks like the federal competitive grant dollars went down from 2017 to 2018 by 9%. The federal pass-through dollars went down, it looked like, by 51%, if that's correct. And I guess my question is, am I seeing this right? But then secondly, can you help us opine on the reason the city received less pass-through dollars? Do you see that as a trend that's going to continue?
Madam Chair, committee members, I'll trust your percentages. I think that what you really should be focused on is the 5.6 and the 6.1. I mean, that's the number of federal dollars, competitive federal dollars coming into the city. Whether we get them directly or we get them through another agency, such as the state of Minnesota or Hennepin County, those are still federal dollars that we're able to competitively procure and use in the city. And it is, compared to the earlier years you see on that chart, it is down, and that's again because of federal resources shrinking and what's available there. This is to just illustrate where we work with our partners to other levels of government to get funding. The pass-through dollars often are highway dollars that come through. We get through the state of Minnesota. And the direct dollars, or I should say, there's also a justice grant that goes through Hennepin County that we get a share of that. And the federal direct dollars are the increase in 2018. One was the we got a COPS grant, and we got a lead grant to the city. Now, those, we won't get those every year. We'll work through those grants, and then in a future year, we may go after those resources again if they're still available for us. And so you'll see that direct dollar rise and lower over time. But really, the important number is the top level number. I mean, that is the competitive resources that we are able to retain for the city.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, the next issue is regional relations and partnerships. And again, the list for 2018 as we go forward to 2019, we do have a opportunity because we have a new council, a new chair, and a new governor. And there'll be an awful lot of activities in the area of transportation and discussion about regional development, particularly in the area of density. And another emerging issue will probably be in the whole area of water quality. But we're fortunate to have Ms. Olson on our staff, and this is a fairly new program. We only have been able to doing this for about the last 4 or 5 years? 5 years. So, Madam Chair, that covers our what we've had proposed or was in the program. One thing I do want to add is we are trying also to try and help with diversity, and in the last couple of years we have had a Capital Pathways intern work with us. We've had 2 of the 4 years it's been available, and we'll probably try and do it again. And we've also had an urban scholar who worked with us and who is now employed by the Civil Rights Department. So we are just trying, and we really like to thank the Citizens League for their attempts to build pathways, a pipeline of folks to be in the whole area of diversity and intergovernmental relations, because I think that program now, this year was like 75 people in the cohort, and I think when they first started it was like 30.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Thank you. With that, are there any other questions or comments from members of the committee? There aren't. I want to thank you for all of your work this past year. Thank you for bringing your results here to City Council. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Yes, Madam Chair, we hear a lot of folks that you guys do a great job. I think I want to emphasize the we. What makes, I think, us being successful in the Capitol is the fact that we reach out and communicate with all city departments. We do have a liaison committee. The IGR committee is very active. And you all can make a phone call or talk to a legislator also. So I think it's been a team effort, and team is pretty broad, and we thank you for that.
You're very welcome. On behalf of all of us, thanks for your continued efforts. With that, colleagues, I'm going to bring Budget Committee to a close. Thank you for being here for so many of the departmental presentations. This concludes all of our results Minneapolis efforts, as I had said at Committee of the Whole yesterday. And because the mayor's budget process and those initial meetings start on Monday, I invite you to bring this results information with you into those budget discussions for the home committees that you're part of in the mayor's office. So thanks so much, and we are adjourned.